think is truly a modern-day Renaissance man. And he's going to share some of his, it's an interesting juxtaposition, his love of music as well as his love of academics. You don't see that too often. But he's the president of Goucher College. He taught at Stanford, he taught at Georgetown and Southern Methodist University, some great schools. At SMU, he was the dean of the Meadows School for the Arts. He has written over 100 scholarly articles and has appeared as a musician with Sam Getz, Bobby McFerrin, and many, many others. He also has written a symphony, which was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Unbelievable. Music for Hubert Laws and Jerry Garcia, and he's the editor for Jazz, the Smithsonian Anthology. Dr. Bowen has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, USA Today, U.S. News and World Report, and on NPR for his book, which I think is a great, great title. I don't know whether it's a literal title or not, we'll find out, but the title of the book is Teaching Naked: How Moving Technology Out of the College Classroom Will Improve Student Learning. A little bit of a teaser up front there, Jose. He was also the winner of the Ness Award for the best book on higher education from the American Association of Colleges and University. He also holds 4 degrees from the very good school, Stanford University. He has a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, a Master of Arts in Music Composition, a Master of Arts in Humanities, and a joint PhD degree in Musicality and Humanities. Stanford recently honored him as a Distinguished Alumni Scholar in 2010. Everybody, please welcome, everybody, Dr. Bowen.
So I forgot to say, I hate standing behind the podium. If I wander around, is that going to make you crazy? And yeah, so, can you hear me? Do you hear me okay if I just talk? No, I got it. Whatever he says. Okay, so I'm gonna stand back here. Well, thank you all. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for being here. There's a piece of propaganda on your table if you want to have some of the Goucher statistics and numbers. But I'm gonna start by talking about the college and learning and the world. And I always start by reminding everybody that 3 technological changes in our lifetime, in fact the last decade, have really radically changed our world. And what's interesting is that it's actually changed human beings. Students who are coming to college today have a different set of skills. Their brains are wired differently. They actually are more intelligent in some ways, and we can measure that. They're certainly better with their thumbs, but they really are. You can measure all this. But these 3 changes are pretty profound. The first is our relationship to knowledge. Right, that many of you in this room will remember back in the day when you wanted to know something, and knowledge was scarce, right? Knowledge was power, we used to say. So if you wanted to know something, you had to go to this thing called a library, and go to that encyclopedia thing, and there was knowledge in there, right? There was content. So the interesting thing about the encyclopedia and the library is that there were standards for publishing and for getting something in there. So the information in the encyclopedia might not have been perfect, it might have been out of date, but it was fairly reliable. It was relatively reliable. There were no cat videos in the encyclopedia. Right? There was no satire, no one trying to fool you. Right? So contrast that now today. In fact, so back in the day when knowledge was scarce, going to college, walking on a college campus was an experience, right? You had entered the realm of knowledge. There were smart people and labs and libraries and books and professors, and that felt like a different kind of place of learning. That's never going to happen again, right? Every student now walks onto a college campus with more information, access to more content in their pocket than in any college library, right? Siri, your phone, knows more than any college professor. Has access to more information, to more lectures from more Nobel Prize winners than any college campus has, right? So knowledge is now rich, it's abundant, it's easily accessible, it's everywhere, right? The Library of Congress, the British Library, all of Beethoven manuscripts, the human genome, they're all on your phone for free. But there's also a lot of cat videos on your phone. right? So we've gone from a state where knowledge was relatively scarce, but fairly reliable, to a world now where knowledge is abundant, it's everywhere, and it's mostly garbage, right? So the analysis, discernment, critical thinking that is now needed is that's gone up in value, right? So because I tell my professor, right? Professing has gone down in value, right? We still call them professors, but not for long, because your phone professes. Your phone is full of professors from Harvard, from Yale, from Stanford, all giving it away for free. And I have to compete with that. So that change in knowledge is one of the big changes. The other two are interesting too. The other is social proximity, right? The meaning of friends has changed, we know that. But the idea of social proximity, of what it means to be friends, to be near somebody, that's a profound change too. That means that the idea of going to office hours, right? Having to go to the bank, right? When I talk to academics and I talk about social proximity, and I remind them, it turns out I actually don't have a bank in Maryland. I moved from Dallas 2 years ago, Chase Bank. There are no Chase banks in Maryland, or not even in Delaware or Virginia, as I understand it, right? So if I got to change bank, and my daughter says, "Why? Who goes to the bank? What do you need from the bank? How often do you use cash? You'll come visit me in New York. You'll get cash. It'll be fine." So for 2 years, I haven't had a bank in the state of Maryland. It's true. I have direct deposits. I check my balance online, take a picture of a deposit if I want to deposit a check, right? So why would I need all those branches? I don't actually have to go, right? So that sense of connection, of having to go physically to do something, that's happened in every aspect of our life. And there's a third change that you've certainly noticed, which is the rise of customization and gaming, right? Our world has been gamified, that we have reward programs and you get points for things, and if you get more points, you get prizes. But it also means that have it your way is no longer a viable slogan. Right? That's the default. Of course I want to have it my way. Aren't you a restaurant after all? Aren't you a company that's going to serve me? I'm the customer. I want to have it my way. But think about how gaming works. Right? Gaming breaks things down so that every single one of you would be pleasantly frustrated at the same time. That's how a game works. Right? It's also called engagement, right? So that means if it's too easy for you, your game gets harder. If it's too hard for you, your game gets easier. But a game can do that for everybody simultaneously, right? So you're on level 1, you're on level 3,000, you're on level 20. You're all happy, right? No college professor can do that. No college can do that, right? We teach to the middle. That's what a good teacher, a good speaker does, right? Look and see if you're falling asleep, I got to go faster. You're confused, I got to slow down, right? I try to find that happy medium. In most of your businesses, you do the same sort of thing, right? You try to individually tailor to customers, but you can't possibly have 5,000 levels of service for 5,000 different people simultaneously altering all the time. But that, in fact, is the expectation, because that is how a video game works. And students today, 18-year-olds, have on average spent more time playing video games than they have in school. Even with perfect attendance, on average, the student who arrives at college at Goucher has 10,000 hours of video game experience behind them. That's more than if they had perfect attendance from starting in middle school. Right? So they're used to an environment where the world responds and is customized to them all of the time. So that changes my business. I think it changes your business too. So for me, it means that what I offer, the service that I offer, has drastically changed. College was set up to offer content, to offer knowledge, right? We're going to teach you stuff you didn't know. I no longer have to do that. You can learn it from your phone. If, it's a big if, it turns out, you know how to learn. So it turns out that most of what I need to teach students, I can't, because the knowledge hasn't yet been invented, right? The jobs of the future aren't here. I have a daughter in New York who's a director of social media. I love it. Everyone's a director these days. 24 years old, she's a director, right? But it's also, right, social media, what the heck is that, right? 10 years ago, there was no such thing. Not only were there no jobs, because there was no such thing. The first tweet had not been sent, right? I guess 10 and a half years ago, the first tweet was sent, right? So the jobs of the future haven't yet been invented, and they will require information that has not yet been discovered. So what you want to hire are employees who can change. You want employees who have really the one skill you most want is self-regulated learning. The ability to get out your phone and learn new things. I'm opposed to textbooks. I'm a little bit of a nutter, you'll see, right? So, because people say, what, textbooks? Yeah, textbooks are bad, right? Do all of you give your employees textbooks when they arrive? Here's everything you need to know in this handy little book. It's indexed. If it's not in here, don't do it. Really? No, you don't. You say, figure it out. But, you don't know how to do that? That's what your computer's for. Find out, right? Ask somebody else. Figure it out. Right? You want employees who can figure it out. They've come from an environment in college where, in general, they've been told, here's what you have to learn. Will it be on the test? Yes, no, right? Will it be on the test? Everything's on the test. And besides, the world is open book, right? So this idea that you're going to memorize this amount of information, then apply it there, and then use it, that's really an old, false model. So my job is to create students who were prepared for the jobs of the future. In order to do that, I have to de-emphasize content, right? There's still going to be content. It's not as if content's all going to go away. It's all going to be psychology and soft skills. But if you don't show up on time, if you don't know how to get along with people, and the number one skill that employers say they want, the ability to solve complex problems with people who are not like you. And that's key, because as the world diversifies, right, you may have an operation in Thailand or in China, and so I want somebody who can adapt and who can deal with people who are from the other political party or who had a different background or a different religion. Right? That skill to be able to solve complex problems with people who are not like you is going up in value. Critical thinking, discernment, analysis, being self-regulated, all those things are going up in value. Having a degree in a particular area, it's going down in value. In fact, I tell parents that the new study came out a couple of months ago. The two majors that are most likely to go away and to be totally roboticized, the two areas of study that we teach that are most likely to go totally away, accounting and finance. Right, they're algorithms, computers, artificial intelligence. Those will be able to be done right already. There's one of my graduates is working on for a company that does it's an artificial intelligence for legal firms. Right, so it doesn't just give you precedent. It actually, you ask it, well, how do I prepare for this case, and it does all that work. Yeah, your interns are going to be out of business, right? I mean, so all of that sort of thing, artificial intelligence combined with the power of the internet, a lot of those jobs will be going away. So we talk about the future. Future companies will be one of two things, right? You can either be an aggregator or a specialist. Right? That for most of us, being a specialist is pretty hard. In my business, right, I'm never going to have a better physics department than Harvard or Stanford. Right? They've got the resources. They're going to be specialists in physics or chemistry or accounting or philosophy. I can't compete in that world. So I'm an aggregator. I'm an integrator. Because one of the things about the internet that's interesting is that while we have access to more information, it's fundamentally disaggregated. It's in little pieces. And little pieces are not that useful. Right? Unless you could, it's like ingredients, right? We liked having our lunch because we didn't have to put the pieces together, right? That's what the chef does. You put the pieces together. So we've become more of an integrator. So the question is, how do I integrate the various experiences? So you want to take philosophy or poetry or physics? I don't care, right? You need to take a little bit of each of those things. But what you're really here to do is to learn how to change your mind. To learn that when you get new content, so here's a new software program, it will do this. Here's a new piece of information about consumers, a new bit about how the marketing works. So the insight, it's been here as marketing. It's been here for a while, right? But have you actually realigned your business to deal with the realities of what the new market is? It's all about change. So my primary job is to teach people how to change. That's a big difference for college. So do I need professors? Well, I do, but I'm not going to call them professors. Because the argument I use is, look, it's like fitness equipment. Does more knowledge make you smarter? Right? We're so confused about this, we actually call it a smartphone. Is it a smartphone? I mean, it knows a lot, but Siri is stupid. I mean, Siri is really dumb, right? Siri doesn't change. She can barely recognize your voice, and can learn a few things, but that knowing more is not what makes you smart. It's the ability to change your mind. In the same way that more exercise equipment doesn't help, right? If I put an exercise bike in every room of your house, 2 in the bathroom, 3 in the kitchen, am I helping? Right? Let's just put more exercise equipment in your house. That'll certainly help your fitness. It doesn't, right? Because it's not more is not always better. So there's a job for somebody called a fitness coach, right? Some guy in a Speedo who says, get on the bike. Really? But think about it. A fitness coach actually does a lot more than that. A fitness coach knows something about your body, knows something about equipment, knows something about nutrition, right? There is some knowledge there that is important. A fitness coach takes measurements, assesses, determines how far you're doing. So no, you're going to hurt yourself, your arms are too small, raise them, but whatever. But a fitness coach mostly gets paid for one skill. A fitness coach learns you. What motivates you? What do you want to do? What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? So you want to wear that new dress for the prom, huh? Pedal faster. That's non-trivial. That is actually the essence of what most of us do, right? It's figuring out what somebody else, what you said, what somebody else wants to do. How do you help them get there? And so I'm in an industry in higher education where we haven't changed in hundreds of years, right? We have jobs for life. We have also, I mean, we are the people of tradition, right? Despite most campuses being liberal politically, we're very conservative places, right? And at that very time, the business model for what we do has been totally annihilated, right? The product we sell, what we actually do, what we sell, our value, people's trust in us, all those things have been totally obliterated in the last 10 years, partly due to technology, partly due to politics, partly due to other kinds of things. So I have to start by figuring out how do I reinvent our business. So I start by saying we are in a new learning economy. Remember the information age? We still say we're in the information age. We're not. Those of you who think we're in the information. This is the learning economy, right? The future belongs to people who can learn more, not who know more, because new stuff is being, I was on the board of the Library of Congress for about 10 years, and there came a point when the technology people came in and said, so we have a new issue. I said, what is that? I said, well, it's called the internet. And so the amount of material, the content that we have in the Library of Congress is created every day on the internet. Once a day, we would need a whole nother, the explosion of the pace of growth is incredible. So how do we do this? So as you heard, I spent a career as a jazz pianist, so I'm an improviser. I spent most of my career listening to other people and making them sound better. That's what I do for a living, right? The saxophonist or the singer. What can I do? The bass player, the drummer, they're going to do their thing. They're impervious. So what can I do to help the singer sound better? That's my job. So that's still my job, right? I am the curator of risk in my organization. That's really what I think leadership is, right? We have to take risk. Is it too much? Is it not enough? I help make those balances. I don't actually do any of the work, I mean, some of you I'm sure do, but I don't. In my organization is large enough that I am mostly trying to change the culture. You've probably heard people talk about leadership as a culture. I absolutely believe that. It isn't so much what I do, although the small decisions do add up. But it's this idea of being a curator of risk, of trying to assess the cost, benefit, risk in everything that we do, and encouraging other people to take risks. So I'm horribly opposed to the idea of strategy and implementation. I think this is the worst idea that's ever infected organizations. Right? You have a strategy, then you need to implement it. How much fun is that going to be? Right? The idea is that everybody in the organization needs to own the strategy. Because everybody in your organizations is making decisions every single day as to what they should be doing. So I want an organization where everybody knows the strategy, everybody can make decisions based upon the strategy, and it's really built in through the whole organization. I like to say that strategy is like exercise. Remember my exercise analogy, right? If you don't exercise today, there are no negatives to it. In fact, there's no, right? It doesn't matter. Right? The payoff is later. Right? The payoff isn't the same is true for strategy. Right? If you focus all of your work today on what you have to do to deal with customers today, and you don't do anything to plan for the next 10 years, the payoff is in 10 years, right? And the negative is in 10 years. So it's easy to not do that. So that's what most people do, right? They focus on what they have to do in front of them today, and they don't spend some of their time every single day, every single person in the organization say, how are we going to stay in business in 10 years? Because in higher education, there's no guarantee we're going to be here. So, so I've renamed the faculty cognitive coaches. Right? That's really what we do. We're here to help people learn, how to rethink their assumptions, how to learn how to change. So that's a very different job than it was before. Again, the name professor, cognitive coach, right? They sound different. They actually do, they actually are different in function. So I don't want to, I don't want to talk until 2 o'clock, but I will. There are a couple of things in here that I should probably point out that we have done at Goucher on the innovation front. Again, in terms of taking more, that's the good thing about being in a business that's about to explode, and 40% of colleges are assumed to go under in the next 10 years. Is that right? I can try anything, right? Because the odds of things not working are pretty high anyway, right? You also know that, right, as you all know, in a time of disruption, the market position changes more than in a time of steady improvement, right? When things are good, Google and Apple and Amazon are all going to do well. If something happens to make everybody wonder if Amazon's going to make, that's the time for opportunity. So this is my chance to do things. So we've introduced the Goucher video application. We were the first college in the country to say, we already are SAT optional. Forget your transcript. Send me a 2-minute video telling me why you want to come. And it turns out, people thought I was crazy, probably was. Only a jazz musician would take that kind of risk. But I said, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll stop doing it. But it turns out that the students who did not send us test scores, who did not send us transcripts, who did not apply normally, who just sent us a 2-minute video, their freshman GPAs were actually higher than the other kids. They actually exceeded what the other kids did. So apparently it worked. We send 100% of our students to study abroad. All right, so we are #1 in the country. And so why do we do that? The world is a more global place. I don't actually care where to go. Again, I don't care about their major, right? You can major in philosophy, you can major in physics, you can major in poetry. I tell parents, don't sweat it, relax. Because you're not going to hire them because of their major. Because if they're an accounting major, computer science sounds pretty good, right? Half of what you learn in a computer science degree is useless in 2 years. Right? It's like being an expert in the iPhone 2. Right? I'm an expert in that. So what? Right? That's fine. It's good training. Being an expert in the iPhone 2 is good training for the iPhone 3 or the 4. But don't think that because you learn the iPhone 2, you're set. Right? You're going to get a job. Maybe your first job, but not the second or the third. So we send everybody to study abroad because I want them to be uncomfortable. I want them to have that experience of going to someplace else where they have an accent, right? Because the first thing that happens when you arrive in a foreign country is you realize that all those people have accents. They all talk funny. And then if you think about it, wait, it's you who have the accent. And if you think a little bit longer, which is why you have to stay for a little bit longer, actually everybody has an accent. There is no neutral. There is no unaccented way to talk. Everybody has an accent. And you also have a thought accent. There is no objective, neutral way to think. Right? The biggest problem I have in research and academia is what's called confirmation bias. Right? You are likely to find the answer you think you are looking for. That is just how we are wired. You have an accent, you forget about your accent most of the time, but it's also a thought accent. So I want you to go away and study abroad and figure out that actually you have an accent, and it's both a verbal accent and it's also a thought accent. So we've also introduced to this idea of cognitive coach a new 3 R's. So you remember the old 3 R's. They were based upon content. They were also skills in a way. But we've come up with 3 new R's. And I started from the premise that parents want 2 things for their kids. As a parent, I can tell you I want both of these things. The first is that you want your kids to be happy. Right? It's really, and we say it to our kids, it's a cliche, and they roll their eyes. I know they do this, right? But it's true. We want you to be happy, right? So Gallup has found a way to measure this. They call it workplace engagement or well-being, right? People who feel a sense of purpose in their job, who are financially and socially more engaged. So again, the sense of well-being. So we measure that with all of our students, right? And it turns out that Gallup tells us that our alums, while they don't make more money than they do from Hopkins or from lots of places, our alums actually make less money. But they are twice as likely to be engaged at work. Twice as likely as the college graduates from other schools. Why is that? Right? It's because money doesn't make you happy. Another cliche, right? It's true. I mean, it's nice. Because the second thing that parents want is, I don't want you living in my basement. I want you to have a job. That's not unreasonable, right? Lots of colleges say, oh, I don't teach vocation. No, a job is not unreasonable. You're paying $250,000 for this thing called college. Your kids should get a job when they're done. They should not be coming home to live in your basement. But it's not all you want. It's not just go to college and have a job and then be miserable, right? So kids will say to me, well, I have 2 majors. You do? Why? Well, I have one for my parents. Parents, don't do this. Because it's not your life, it's their life, right? And also, you're taking a bet, right? You're betting that this major will be the major that gets you the job. So the most popular major with the most amount of money 2 years ago, in 2014, what major did you want to have? What major got you the highest paying job in the country in 2014? Not business. Business is in the top 10. Computer science is in the top 10. Petroleum engineering with a minor in Arabic. $180,000 a year average starting salary for those majors. You can go to payscale.com if you want to compare years. So that was a good bet in 2010 to major in petroleum engineering with a minor in Arabic. That got you a good job. They just laid off 100,000 petroleum engineers in Texas alone in the last year. Those people are looking for other jobs. Not in petroleum engineering, because the economy changes. So in 50 years from now, 20 years from now, right, you don't know what your kids, so there's not only what your kids like to do, it's where the jobs are going to be, and it changes faster than you can predict. So don't bet with your kids' life. They want to major in philosophy? That's fine. Because they're not really, it's not the content in philosophy that matters. It's learning how to think, it's learning how to write, it's oral communication, it's showing up on time. So we looked at those 2 things. We said, what do parents want? They want happiness for their kids. We can measure that. They want a job for their kids. We can measure that too. So for the last year we have data. Of all of my graduates, 6 months out, how many of them have jobs or are in graduate school? All of them. 100% of my graduates have jobs or in graduate school. Remember I said they don't make as much money? They don't. Because I don't have as many accounting majors, and right? They are more likely to go to Teach for America. Social justice matters for our community. We are one of the more diverse colleges in America. We are one of the, have more first generation, 25% first generation students, almost more than any other college in the country. My workforce, my professorate are more diverse than any other college. We're in Baltimore. We want to look like Baltimore. This deeply matters to us. And I'm willing to say to parents, so that means your kids may not make as much money, because they might be teachers, right? They're gonna major in sociology. They want to work for a not-for-profit. That's what our students do. But they are employed. But if you think about the combination of what really matters, happiness and a job, that's what you want. So the question is, how do I get there? And so I get there by emphasizing the 3 R's. And again, the data told me, I looked at the Gallup data on what well-being and engagement meant, and they said, what happens in college? The first R, relationships. Matters way more than content. In fact, the #1 predictor of how much money you will make in life, the #1 predictor of how much money you will make in life, did one person in college believe in you? One person. Did one person excite you about learning? Did you find a mentor? Somebody said, I think you're going to make good poetry. I think you could be a physicist. I like the way you write. I believe in you. That's all that has to happen. That one thing predicts happiness, success, engagement at work, purpose, but also how much money you make. What percentage of American college graduates had that experience? One person, not all their professors. Nobody likes everybody. Do most students in America graduate having one professor who said, I'm in your camp, call on me, I believe in you? No. Most American students, 60%, graduate without that experience ever happening. They couldn't find one person on campus. Right? Well, of course, they may not have met a professor. They may have gone to a place that has 700 kids in a class. Right? So that's a number that I want to see being at 100%. Because I know it matters. So relationships matter. We've re-engineered everything around the campus around relationships. I'm building new residence halls. I'm putting faculty in them. I want faculty living on campus. I want people to be able to talk to students. I want faculty to go to athletic events, to be available. Matters a whole lot more than what subject you teach. right? Knowing people, relationships, the friends that you make. Why do students leave college? Why do they not graduate? Why do they leave after a year or two? Is it because school is too hard? No. The number one reason you leave? Not enough friends. I don't fit in here. Right? Social connectedness actually matters a whole lot for your success in college, just like it does in the rest of the world. So relationships matter, number one. Number two, resilience, right? Some people call it grit as well, right? Or persistence, but we call it resilience because it has an R in it, right? It's easy to remember, right? So, but resilience, that stick-to-itiveness, keep going, get back on the horse, right, matters, because you're going to fail in life. And this is, when I do this at orientation, it's like, hi, welcome to college, get ready for failure. But I'm here because I was successful in high school, right? I was so good, I got those great, I achieved, now I'm here. I said, I know, but don't get used to that, right? Because the world has failure in it, right? You are going to fail, and so it's what you do next that matters, which is the third R, which is reflection. Because it's not just about getting back on the horse. It's about getting back on the horse and changing what you do. If you do the same thing over and over again, right, banging your head against the wall, right, that's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. What you have to do is change. So change requires reflection. What was I doing wrong? What could I do better? I learned something new today. How does it change what I already knew? Right? If you don't do that step, you're just a phone. You're just a smartphone. You've memorized a bunch of stuff. You can spit it back out. That's not what you want. That's not what we want as parents. That's not what you want as employers. We want people who can change because we know the world is going to change and life is going to throw crazy stuff at you. So our 3 R's are a very different approach to higher education: relationships, resilience, and reflection. But we started with that because that's what we know 30, 40 years from now makes a difference in your life. And I'm sure there are people in this room who majored in all sorts of things, who went to colleges, good, bad, and ugly, right? And look where you've ended up. And so it's not just that you learned a bunch of content and that's why you're successful. It's because you're adaptable, you make relationships, et cetera. So why not actually make that the focus of our college experience? Make it about integrating all of those things. So that's a pretty different way to think about the college experience. And so I should probably leave it at that and then take some questions. But I don't have any wonderful pearls of wisdom for I can only tell you how I'm doing it. And so I'm willing to say to my people all the time that I'm willing to fail. Again, I said I was the curator of risk. So part of what I do is I say, I don't have a crystal ball, right? We're going to test hypotheses. We're going to see what happens. If it doesn't work, we'll change. So I announced this when I announced the video application, and I got all the hate mail from my alums. What are you doing? How can you possibly tell if a student can go to college based upon a video? And I said, if it doesn't work, I'll go on national television and say I was wrong. But if NPR will have me back again, right, I'm in the arts. I know that people remember bad publicity. As long as they spell your name right. I had somebody call me and says, you won't believe this. I'm so angry with you. They're talking about Goucher on talk radio in New Jersey, and they're slamming you. I said, they're talking about Goucher on talk radio in New Jersey? That's fabulous. What station, right? This is great news. And literally as an artist, I had this, right? My best day of sales ever at Amazon was the day the New York Times panned my latest CD, right? Because they spelled my name right. Literally, it was my best day ever. I shoot right to the top because I was on the front page of the arts. Remember the Arts and Leisure? That's when it was a hard copy. I was above the fold, and my name was right there. Right? He didn't like the music very much, but it didn't matter. So I've had that experience. But mostly, what I was channeling to my organization is failure is okay. Tolerance for failure is necessary for success. If we always want to be right, we're not going to be able to make those disruptive changes that we're going to need to make in our current economy. We're just going to do incremental changes, and we know that at the moment the returns for that are diminishing. So that's what we do at Goucher College. That's what you get when you hire a jazz musician to be president. Thanks very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Two points. We were just talking about this yesterday about textbooks, the expense and everything else in school, and then you can't reuse them the next year because the new revision comes out. are you saying that you don't use textbooks anymore?
Right. So here's what I do instead. So the first thing is to recognize, actually I've got a new book that's actually due next Thursday, that's out in January. It's the sequel to Teaching Naked. It's called Teaching Naked Techniques. But by the way, you'd not be surprised at the web traffic I get to teachingnaked.com. So if you want to know more, so one of my suggestions is, first of all, you've got to search like a student, right? So if I assign you chapter 4 in the textbook, and I say it'll take you 15 minutes to read, it's 20 pages, it's condensed, it's concise, it's great. What a student will do is they will go to Google and they will type in the subject matter, and they will hit the video search and search for a video, and then they go to if there's a little tool, I show people how to do this, under search tools, you click that button, you get duration, you can search for short. So I can search for a 4-minute video on, right, because that's not what you do. Most of us, you go to Google and you type in the thing and you get all those sorts of things. But you could just search for short videos, right? So that's what the students are doing anyway, right? They're not, and in fact, they'll spend an hour looking for a 3-minute video rather than do your 10-minute reading, right? That's just how they're wired. The stats on what students, 68% of students now say they use their phone for most of their academic work. Not a laptop, not an iPad, their phone. Which is why they don't want to do the reading, because the print's too small, right? I mean, it's just, they're not readers. 25% of all internet traffic is video. But there's another problem with textbooks. Textbooks are overly reliable, right? You trust the textbook. The first hit on Google, you should not trust. But when they come work for you, you're going to say, in fact, true story from my daughter. She's like, well, I'm up for her first day in New York at the big firm, Madison Avenue. They want me to do a press release for the New York Times. I've never done a press release. They say, figure it out. She says, what do you do? She calls me. I say, Dad, what do I do? I say, what do you mean, what do you do? What do you always do? Oh, you mean Google it? Yes. How to write a press release for the New York Times, right? But maybe not the first hit. Right? Look through maybe there's a better source of those 150 hits you're going to get. Think about what's more reliable. So all of us in this room are skeptical. We know that not everything on the internet is true. Students are not. They're incredibly naive. Right? I found it on the internet. You did? In fact, the story of the police chief in Annapolis, right? He put his hand on a Bible. He went before the Maryland Senate, and he testified that 37 people died on the first day of marijuana legalization in Colorado. He swore to this with his hand on a Bible. His source was the internet. A source called the Daily Current, but not spelled like current, like black currants, like fruit. It was a satire site. And he quoted this satire site to the Maryland Senate and said, well, I found it on the internet, right? It's not true at all, right? So most of us on the internet is garbage. You should be skeptical. So my strategy is search on the internet. Find a video that you think gives you an explanation of the periodic table or the electoral college or whatever it is that we're supposed to be learning. Take out an index card. What's the bias? Write in one paragraph. What's the bias of the article you found? What did you like best? What's wrong with the, so you went to the Hamlet version of Cliff Notes. Remember Cliff Notes? Well, Cliff and his notes are still online. Only now they're videos. So, okay, so watch the video for Hamlet and tell me what theme they forgot. Because what I want you to do is now be skeptical of what you find, because the world is messy, textbooks are not. So I actually want students to experience the mess. So yeah, the answer is fewer textbooks, more mess, which means the internet is actually where you're going to go to search for most things. I want you to be digitally literate. I want you to really understand that when you search for stuff, you can find bad content. So I make them criticize and analyze everything they find, and then say, well, which is better content? How would you know? Can you compare? So they're always doing that sort of thing. And it also has the benefit of saving $1,000 a month. sorry, $1,000 a year in textbook costs, because the textbook industry is, a crazy place. Second question.
How do you get people to stop texting and answer the telephone and have a conversation?
Right. So there are two strategies here. One is that, you could be the policeman. You could say, I'm going to take all your phones. I'm going to, I say, you get one of those plastic shoe racks and you hang it on the back of the door and you say, put your phone in there when you come in, and you can watch it buzz the whole class. The Geneva Convention's not yet ruled on whether or not that's worse than waterboarding. But it's pretty bad to have students like, my phone, it's buzzing. It's pretty bad. So the only solution is to convince students, there are two ways to do this. One is, I've got to convince you that your brain does different things when you're on Facebook. Right? Your brain actually does things that you don't want it to do. It's interesting because one of the things that it does, if you don't have downtime, you don't develop a moral compass. Our ancient sages were actually right about something really important. A day of rest, meditation, not working on the Sabbath, whatever it is that's in your tradition. Those things are actually essential for your brain. We have the brain scans of people at rest and the brain scans of people who are always on Facebook. And if you do this with 18 to 25-year-olds, you see a difference. You see that the kids who have not had that reflecting, meditative, resting time they don't light up when you tell them a moral story, when you say, do you feel inspired to go do good work in the world? They don't have the same brains set up. So I have to explain to them what Facebook is actually doing to your brain. Another science, again, your brain remembers the last thing you do every night and processes all night long. Right? This is really interesting. Your brain, what your brain prioritizes, the last thing you do before you go to sleep as being really important. So if you have a problem at work you want to solve, look at it before you turn the lights off and say, okay, your brain will then process that while you're sleeping. That's great. But if you study for 6 hours and you're practicing for chemistry, you're trying to solve a business problem, and then you get on Facebook for 5 minutes, your brain thinks that Facebook is the priority. And that's what it processes all night long. Right? So helping students understand how their brain works is the other hand. The other thing, though, is engagement. If classes are exciting and engaging and people are jumping around and something happens, then you're not on your phone. When something that you really want to do, you're watching the NBA Finals and there's 54 seconds left, you're probably not on your phone, right? You probably watch it, right? That's engaging. So when the Harry Potter movie is really exciting, they're less likely to be on their phones. Although, I say less likely because we would not be on our phones during the final scene of a great apocalyptic movie. But these days, they have to actually tell you to put your phone away in the movie theater. That tells you how far things have gone. But ultimately, I can't. They're going to come to you and they're going to want to be on their phones all day. And if I had a solution to that problem, I wouldn't be here. Yes, sir.
Your presentation today reminds me of an educational philosopher named John Dewey.
Oh, yeah.
Who said in a democracy, you want to educate as many people as you can because that will help them to be smarter voters, right? My question for you is, do you think higher education today is doing a good job of teaching us to be critical thinkers and in looking at these candidates for, let's say, president?
Oh, you clearly know the answer to that. So the question is, John Dewey, who I've stolen a lot from, argued that the real point of higher education in general, was that it was critical for democracy, that citizens had to be able to judge for themselves whether candidates were lying or telling the truth or would be good for the country, et cetera. So clearly we failed, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be looking at the election the way we're looking at it. And I think that is a failure of higher education, right? It's because we spent the last 50 years stuffing them full of content. What I call the sausage model of higher education, right? You stuff them full of content and snip them loose. That clearly doesn't work, right? So they know a lot of stuff about chemistry or philosophy or accounting, but they can't judge for themselves.
So what's the cognitive skill that we lack?
Well, so we've given lip service. Every college in the country says, we teach critical thinking. We all say it, but almost nobody measures it. Almost nobody integrates it over 4 years. I was part of an experiment about 15 years ago at Miami University where, again, critical thinking was a big part of the curriculum. Great. It says, well, are the kids learning it? No. So let's try an experiment. Half of you, when you teach, use the words critical thinking. Actually, just say, so that thing we just did right now in physics or philosophy, that's called critical thinking. And the rest of you just keep doing what you're doing. Turns out that made a difference because students didn't know it was critical thinking. Because look, we live here. I always say faculty are strange. We're weird. We like school so much we never left. That's weird, right? So we understand all of this stuff. We like it here. It's all obvious to us that we're teaching critical thinking, and that physics and philosophy are just two sides of the same coin. And, right, that's obvious. That is totally opaque to students who are going through the system for the first time. So we've got to put the breadcrumbs out.
One more question. Then why don't you use a test like the Watson-Glaser for selecting your students? That measures critical thinking now.
So, we were just talking about this. So there's a new test of critical thinking, but I suspect that critical thinking is a broader skill. And so actually what we're doing is I've started a new project, which is a pretty radical thing. So we're the only school in the country. I test 100% of my students, all the students coming in all 4 years, for a whole 17 psychological measures. Tolerance for ambiguity, cultural sensitivity, IP. I give them the grit test, right? Because I want to know what's changing and what's not. I want to get a sense of, does study abroad change their cultural sensitivity? Or do they have to have a Muslim roommate? Because those are different kinds of experiences. Does either one of them work? I know it also happens automatically anyway. So I'm in the middle of trying to figure out what is it that we want to measure. We use the Gallup polls. I'm doing all of that, well-being, the sense, your sense of self, your sense of your own honesty. We have a whole series of those things. And so I'm not, again, I'd say that I just had a meeting last week. The test is, I got 128 questions on the survey. It's too long. It takes an hour. I got to get it down so my students will actually all do it. So, but that idea is a new one coming to higher ed, because I'm also looking at the integration. I'm not just saying, well, this one course, you got an A, so what? Does the 4 years go together? Does it integrate your experiences? Because if you're just learning a little bit of chemistry, you can do that from your phone, and that's free. You don't need to pay me anything for that.
So, I and other people in the education field have occasionally said things like, well, there are some basics that one should know before one can be a critical thinker, that we shouldn't have to figure out every time we get to it what 2 plus 2 is. And so I wonder, given your 2-minute video entrance exam, how do you deal with that? That the students it's easier if the students come in knowing something before you can do the wonderful things, the outside the box things that you're doing.
Yeah, so there are a lot of assumptions in there about the question is, do students have to know something before? So, I think psychology has pretty firmly come down on the side that's a false dichotomy, that you actually learn by doing, and that the idea that you first learn, then you apply, that's not actually how learning works. That if you memorize something, if I say 2 plus 2 equals 4, this is how numbers work. In fact, there's actually even a new theory that this is why girls do better in math for the first 6 or 7 grades and then it changes. Is because girls are better at, when you say, well, this is how math works. I simplified it. I didn't tell you, I simplified it for you. And then I get to high school and it's like, well, they're irrational numbers. What? You didn't tell me that in the 3rd grade. I memorized what you told me. Now I'm stuck. In the same way that conditional instructions matter. If I tell you you're going to do CPR, patient must be lying down to start. Somebody has a heart attack in a chair. You can't help them because they're in a chair, right? Not lying down. It's like, well, if I say, but usually, generally, right? The way that the way that you condition people, you can in fact learn things while you're applying them. There's a famous experiment at Harvard Medical School where one class was taught anatomy in the traditional way. It's Tuesday, it must be the bones of the foot. The other class was taught, welcome to CSI anatomy. There's a patient over there with a bullet hole in the foot. Figure out what happened. Oh, and by the way, there's a website online that has the bones of the foot. Those people got higher scores when they passed their medical boards. So, the engagement, the willingness to learn, they're only 18. So what do they know anyway? And they know all sorts of things. So, I'm not sure. I agree with you that there are things they want them to learn. You have to have content in order to think. But I'm not sure I have a good way to test what is it that you know. And even if I did, would that predict who is going to do well later in life? It predicts who does well in college. That is the traditional predictor. Grades predict grades. But that's because grades are about how good you are at figuring out the system, in my view. Yes, sir.
The teaching them how to think. So how much is this just kind of going back to, do you apply formal logic, teaching logical fallacies, some of Bacon's items in mind, kind of come to mind, those sorts of things. You mentioned cognitive dissonance, right? So all the behavioral biases and cognitive biases they have. How much, those things help people be better thinkers? Is that part of the curriculum?
Yeah, so I think on the one hand, there are certainly, formal processes back to content. There are certainly things that you have to learn. There are certainly ways, and, logic is certainly useful. A course in ethics, all those kinds of things, help you. Those are good things. But learning is situational, right? So ultimately, you and I probably both know some logic professors who are really stubborn, right? Who don't change easily. Because, it's the psychology and the situational aspects. And so your social learning, your relationships, how readily you admit that you made a mistake, which has nothing to do with how smart you are or how much you know. It has to do with how, and that turned out to be a really important part of working with other people and solving a problem, is being able to say, I may have made a mistake. So I have to teach that too. So yes, we teach those kinds of traditional skills. Writing, obviously, we have the first thing I did was added a 3-year writing requirement. So every single student goes through 3 years of writing. I'm now doing the same thing for math. Because math is a disaster in high school, and so we've added what I call data analytics, because math was too scary. But I want every single graduate to be able to do something with data and analysis and spreadsheets, right? And I don't actually care about calculus. I don't think they have to have calculus. But you've got to have spreadsheets, percentages. You have to know how to do a mortgage for personal finance. But the bar is a lot lower than we thought, right? Most of our students, they didn't do well in high school algebra, so they can't take calculus. And if they could take calculus, they would have nothing they could use. So there are those kinds of skills, but I also want students to have the social skills to be able to process and say, I might be wrong. Because if you can't say, I might be wrong, none of that formal logic stuff matters. Yeah. Yeah, so I can teach you that under these circumstances, these are how you do it, and I can teach you that in philosophy or ethics or something like that. But I think there's a personal side. And so, and again, I had that experience. The religious studies course I took, it was fine. Living with Muhammad changed my life, right? Because the guy was praying all the time. He was in the room. It was just, I had to learn to live with somebody who was fundamentally different. And that challenged my assumptions more than any course ever did. So I'm not sure all of it happens in courses. It might happen on the athletic field. I might learn leadership or teamwork. Or, man, this guy really pisses me off, but I got to work with him every day. Yeah.
Dr. Bowen,
okay. Go ahead.
You mentioned that change is inevitable, but in many of the workforces, they are not accustomed to this much change over time like we're experiencing today. What is your recommendation to business leaders to help their teams think more innovatively, to want to change, to embrace change?
There's I teach them all to play jazz. Getting used to discomfort, right? It's tolerance for ambiguity is one of those key skills that I measure, because I think it's that ability to not know certainty. I don't know what's going to happen on Monday. So journalists have had to learn how to do this, right? People who ran Tower record stores, that's actually my other favorite example, right? Because I've been in the music business for a lifetime, and so 20 years ago I went to a big convention and said, you're still calling it the record business. That's a problem. It's not the record business. The records are going to go away. No, they're not. It's the music business, right? You sell music. You don't sell CDs or records or those objects are not what you're actually selling. What you're selling is an experience with music. And when you start thinking about that, you're going to have an easier time, because someone's eventually going to offer a service where you could just use this new internet thing and you could rent music. You wouldn't have to buy it. You could just get it from something. You would anything you want to listen to in my library, what iTunes now, but Pandora, what they basically do now. But 20 years ago, nobody could imagine that. So again, to me, it's like exercise, right? The payoff is 10 years from now. You've got to get used to the fact that some of your energy on a daily basis can't be on today. It has to be on what does the business look like 10 years from now. Journalism is a great example. Tower Records. Another great example is, imagine being at Hasbro in 1996. Right? You're a toy company, and you have one competitor, right? Mattel, and that's what you do. No, are you in the toy business, or board games your future, or are you an entertainment company, right? So, but if you're not constantly having that sort of, you're not going to be able to say, I don't know. We live in an uncertain time, and so I think that getting people used to that living in uncertainty is in fact the norm, And yeah, I don't, if I had a great way to do that, yeah.
What about that population of students whose abilities lie more in the arts, performing, music, singing? What's the future going to be like for them?
So I'm an artist. I'm a musician. Creativity is highly valued. You all want people who are going to come in and give you a different perspective. The problem is that we have this notion that, well, you're either right or left brained, which is, it turns that out to be true, right? Everybody, I mean, that's just ridiculous. But sure, some people, tend to like this and don't like the math. But that's, what's called a mindset. If you believe that you can't do math, guess what? You can't do math. So I, started by teaching arts entrepreneurship. I created the first arts entrepreneurship program in the country at SMU 10 years ago. And so teaching artists contracts and tax law did not make me really popular. But I said, look, I had to figure out how do I figure out that you need to know a little bit of this, right? If you don't have a contract and you sell a 2-ton sculpture and you forgot to include shipping, you're screwed, right? My favorite example for musicians is, okay, so if you're late for a wedding, what's your liability? Well, they might not have to pay me the full price, or maybe they don't have to pay me at all. I said, no, you ruined their wedding. You have to buy them a new wedding. Right? Unless you limit your liability in a contract, right? So everybody, I think, who's an artist or who's creative still needs to have some data skills, still have to have some ability to translate, to work in that world. And what we're looking for are people who can do both. It doesn't mean you have to know code and be a computer science major, but you can't be afraid of computers. Right? The people who are afraid of data and afraid of computers are going to have a limited future. Right? The people who only do computers and aren't creative, they have a limited future too. So, I think the new world will be for students who are able to do a little bit of both of those things. And so I think there's a broader range of skills that you'll need, but it's the belief and the ability that you can change. And it turns out, again, it's back to your question. Belief in change is also critical. Right? If you have a fixed mindset and you believe you can't change, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the magic here is, how do I convince all those artists and all those dancers? We have a huge dance program. How do I convince those dancers that they can bring the thing that made them as a good dancer, right? Resilience, perseverance, hard work, creativity, and they can use that to be a great banker or a great insurance salesman, right? That same set of skills will work there, but they got to do a little math. And it's not a lot of math, but they have to do, so again, I've been testing this, road testing with my parents, right? Say, I'm going to force all of your kids to do a little math, even the ones who hate it. But I'm not going to call it math. Right? I think parents get it more than the kids do. But yeah. Okay.
Kind of follow up to what Marie was talking about. Do you actually have classes to help students be innovative, to think innovatively?
So the core question, do you have classes? So here's the problem. Professors think the answer to everything is a class, right? Because we're the people of the class, right? So it's a course. So like wellness, we should have a course in that. Personal responsibility, we should have a course in that. We should have a course in everything. It's like, well, actually, a lot of the learning that happens on a college campus happens in your room, happens in the dorms, happens on the athletic field. So to me, the solution is not, do I need courses in all these different things, which is actually kind of hard to do. The solution is, I need incentives and measures for students to engage in these behaviors across the campus and to learn from each other to make all those things that I pay for, right? Because I pay for athletic fields, I pay for the student paper. I want learning to happen there. I want to squeeze every amount of learning out of everything that I'm paying for. So, for example, I looked at the idea. Wellness is a perfect. Exercise helps you learn. We know this. So, let's have a course in wellness. Well, I'm not sure that. Turns out courses in wellness don't work at all. Many of you had a PE course. It doesn't have any effect. Doesn't do anything to students, right? How about more gym, more physical? Well, you know what that's going to be like. So, how about an app? How about a badge, right? The more you exercise, if you exercise so much or you eat well, because I have all these swipe cards, I know what students are doing. Students said, I don't need a badge, don't need your stinking badges. But if there was an app that I could compete with all the other students to see who is like exercising the most and eating the best or being the most creative or the most socially responsible, well that I would do. So I'm not sure. This is part of the re-engineering. I'm not sure what the answer is going to be, but I'm sure the answer is not a course for everything. I'm sure the answer is, how do I re-engineer all of our systems to help students integrate in ways that they're not integrating now? All right, I got one more.
Last question.
Okay, take your pick. Duke it out.
Thank you. I love everything you're saying. And as a college president, I applaud you. You're doing exactly what we need to do, which is turn higher education on its ear. Now, how do we get the faculty who are already, say, 20 years away from retirement, how do we get them to change their perspective, and how do we change how PhDs are trained? Because I was trained in my content and to have disciples in my discipline. So how do we change that with our faculty and our new PhDs?
Yeah, so we all want to reproduce. So how do we help faculty who weren't trained to do this and don't want to do this change? So since I'm talking to a group of business leaders, I'll use a broader business analogy to answer the question, which is that, I remember I said strategy was like exercise. Look, all of us have to spend some time every day dealing with the present, right? But we should also spend some time every day forgetting some of the past. And we need to spend some time, the strategy piece is, right, forgetting the past and reinventing your future. And most of us spent most of our time in the first place, right, thinking about, what do I have to do today? Well, the truth is you all have to do that, right? Your customers are today. And 20%, 30%, some percentage of your customers, they don't want the future. They want a teller when they go into the bank, right? So you can't just get rid of that right away because you've got people who want that. So my workforce is like any of your workforces. I've got, a third, or some percentage. I've got some early adopters. I've got some curmudgeons. And then I've got a sizable percentage of over my dead body. And in my profession, they have a job for life. So, I have to work on the early adopters and then really mostly the middle group. All right? The group that I'm always most worried about are the people in the middle who are on the fence. Because they could go with the curmudgeons, they could go with the early adopters. If I can get a few more of them to change, to say, this is good, we're going to go with this new plan, we need to be able to change, then I have a chance. So on the one hand, I work on the middle third a lot, try to align my incentives with all of that. But for our campus, I talk about students all the time. We're going to be student-focused. That's really all I have to do, because nobody's going to say, I don't like students. We're going to college campus, I hate students, right? That's not going to, right? They may not really mean it, but they pay lip service to it at least. So I say, is student success really the focus of everything we do? Can we re-engineer everything for equity and student success?